I'll call the Planning Commission meeting of December 19th, 2018 to order. Could Secretary call the roll, please?
Chairperson Sattler, Vice Chair Monroy, Commissioner Borders.
Present.
Commissioner Dors.
Present.
Commissioner Aswine.
Here.
Commissioner Preston. Here. Commissioner Tingle.
Here.
A quorum's present.
Thank you. Hope, could you lead us in the pledge, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Public comment. The public is invited at this time to comment on and discuss any topic that is relevant to or within the authority of the Planning Commission, including any matter that is not specifically included on the agenda as an action item. Is there anyone here for public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to approval of the minutes of November 28, 2018. Has everybody had an opportunity to read them?
There is one correction, though. Ms. Preston, Commissioner Preston did the pledge last meeting.
Okay. Any other corrections or changes, modifications? Entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Mr. Acting Chair, I'll move that we accept the minutes as amended.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
We have a second by Ms. Tingle. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I abstain.
Yeah, 2 abstentions, right?
2 abstentions.
If I have to, then I abstain as well.
Okay.
I was absent.
Okay, microphone, please.
Yeah.
I abstain as well.
Modification of the agenda. Items on the agenda may be taken out of order. The public body may combine 2 or more agenda items for consideration, and the public body may remove an item from the agenda or delay discussion relating to an item on the agenda at any time. Any changes to our 2-item? Okay.
You want to flip them just because?
Well, it might make sense, but but we'll leave it the way it is. Public hearing. Item E1, SUP-07-059-1 for possible action. To consider a modification to a special use permit for a sign that exceeds the height limit in the general commercial zoning district on property located at 3800 South Carson Street, APN 009-153-17. Ms. Sullivan.
Thank you. The applicant is requesting a special use permit to have a sign that will have a realized height of 40 feet. In 2007, the applicant obtained a special use permit for a sign with a height of 30 feet. The property is currently improved with just under 2,000 square feet of building area. The uses include a casino with multiple restaurants and a 7,717 square foot conference center that just opened this month. The applicant has observed that, and I have this graphic up and it's in your packet as well, has observed that the support arm for the traffic lights on South Carson Street coupled with the street sign are obstructing the visibility of the sign from northbound traffic. The applicant has also indicated that maturing landscaping is starting to obscure the sign. Staff has consulted with the Public Works staff to determine if the traffic light support system would be modified as part of the South Carson Street project and has been advised it will not. Therefore, the situation will not be modified as part of the South Carson Street project. Per the Carson City Development Standards 4.6.5, a variation to a sign standard may be permitted subject to a special use permit. The Planning Commission has the authority to approve a special use permit upon making the 7 required findings in the affirmative. I'd like to address finding number 2, which addresses neighborhood compatibility. This sign will be taller than the other signs in the area. And when we look at signs and we look at signs exceeding dimensional criteria, that's something we frequently are looking at. Having said that, the Marriott sign next door is 35 feet tall. The Bodine sign, which is down the street, is 39.2 feet tall with an architectural grille that's associated with the sign that's 42.25 feet tall. So you do have signs that are somewhat similar, although in fairness, we look at this exact area, this is taller than the other signs. Given that the hotel sign is the 35 feet, that this is one of the biggest, probably busiest properties on the corridor, particularly with the new conference center opening up in addition to what we already had in place, the casino and the restaurants. Staff is making finding number 2 in the affirmative, but I think that's probably the one to focus on. And staff is recommending approval of this request. Garrett Gordon, representing the applicant, is present, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Any questions for staff?
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman?
Borders?
Hope, on your recommended conditions of approval number 9, it reads to me like there's more to this than just raising the sign. The literature indicates that all we're going to do is just lift the existing sign up, but this reads as if the sign is going to be a little bit larger. Which is which?
Thank you for pointing that out. This is actually a modification to a special use permit. So what I used as my base document is the conditions of approval at the time of approval in 2007. So when you read number 9, that's what you're reading. The sign is there. It's there at that square footage. The other signage is there. The only change would be to increase the height from 32 feet to 40 feet. That's a requested modification. And as I understand it, what the applicant's proposing to do is take the existing sign and essentially elevate it an additional 8 feet. There will be no modification to the sign.
But the way this is written, to me, is replacement of a sign which is 35 feet, 20 feet wide, and having 400 square feet, to a sign that's 40 feet high, 36 feet wide, and has a copy area of 600 square feet.
What I can do is I can work on different wording that will clarify maybe a standalone for this revision, because what I tried to do was incorporate the modification into the baseline conditions of approval, and I think that's where it's getting a little convoluted. And so let me work on a condition that will be a standalone just for the revision.
Okay, so the wording is basically true. What they want to do is just elevate the sign 8 feet as it is, just jack it up.
Correct, and actually, off the top of my head, we could certainly just leave the wording in 9 alone, since that's with the original special use permit, and we could add a condition of approval that says, relative to modification number 1, the primary freestanding sign for the casino may be elevated 8 feet to realize a height of 40 feet.
Any other questions? Okay, does the applicant want to just come up and have you read the conditions of approval, and are they acceptable to you?
Sure. Good afternoon. Acting Chair, for the record, Garrett Gordon, representing Casino Fandango. To my right, Court Cardinal, President and General Manager of Fandango. Yes, we've worked through the conditions. We have no objection. We appreciate Hope Sullivan's time on this matter, working through those conditions, and we appreciate her recommendation of approval, and we're ready to proceed as is.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions for the applicant? Okay.
As one of the reasons or impetus for this change, the shrubbery, if you will, that is obstructing the sign. So if that's part of the reason for this request, at what point then I'm assuming those shrubs will continue to grow, and will we be coming back here in 10 years for an additional change because the shrubs have now grown so big that now you can't see the sign again? Just wondering if maybe it's better to just trim back the shrubs.
Court Cardinal, responding to you. We have already trimmed some of the shrubs. The intention is not to let them get any higher, but we do want to keep the beautification of the property intact, so we would prefer not to remove the shrubs so we can keep the green portion of it. But
what will the effect of the speed limit on South Carson Street being reduced to 35 miles an hour have on the ability of people going through that corridor of seeing your sign? It seems to me that slowing the speed limit down is going to increase its existing visibility. And it's only for those people who are stopped at that one certain point where the signal cross arm blocks the view of your sign. I'm just having trouble seeing why we should approve this when there is there's no major change or the changes are going to be improved by slowing the speed limit down. You'll be able to see the sign better. Any comment on that?
yes, actually a couple things. One, you are correct. It all depends on how long we have the slides up on the sign itself for messaging. One of the other things I'd like to point out is since the freeway completion, I've been informed that we have lost 60% of our traffic in front of the property and in front of the dealerships. And at a distance, you'll be able to see the sign earlier as well if you're coming from the south or the north, which will help out our business levels too.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Not, I have one more for Hope.
Okay, go ahead.
And the message sign on this sign is one of what I think is the least obtrusive in town as far as following the rules. However, with this new permit, does that force this message board to come under the new requirements, or is it grandfathered into the requirements that were there when it was first approved in '07?
Unless you are to ask to incorporate the new requirements, it would default to the conditions of approval from 2007. Like you, my takeaway is it's pretty much consistent with our current requirements. I don't think there would be a downside to incorporating those in case there was an interest in causing, more frequent changes that then would conflict with traffic. That way we'd know what the standards were. I can draft something on that real quick.
And I guess my other question is the proposed signage compatible with the improvements that are proposed for South Carson Street, where they're changing landscaping and traffic flow? That might be for the engineer.
Yeah. So as far as the South Carson improvements, it should work well with the improvements that are in place there. A lot of the landscaping that's proposed on the project is happening. And I'll talk about it on the next item, but there's a landscaping buffer on the east side of the roadway, so on the opposite side of the Casino Fandango sign. There, as far as it with the project being compatible, it should not be an issue.
Okay, so there are no improvements other than whatever might be done to the sidewalk on the west side of Carson Street at that point?
For the most part, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Bring it back to us?
Yes, bring it. Oh, a public comment. Is there anyone here from the public who wishes to address this item? Seeing none, we'll bring it back for Planning Commission discussion and perhaps a motion.
I move.
Wait a minute.
Regarding the electronic message sign that Commissioner Borders brought up, the language could be that the electronic message sign shall comply with Carson City Municipal Code 4.4.7.W, which addresses off-premise electric message display sign standards.
Where would you incorporate that in your?
From what I heard, we would leave condition 9 alone with no changes, add a condition 20, which would say for modification number 1 to the special use permit, the freestanding sign advertising the casino may be elevated 8 feet to realize a height of 40 feet. No other changes to the sign are permitted. And then add a condition number 21 that indicates that the electronic message sign shall comply with the provisions of Carson City Municipal Code 4.4.7.W, which identifies the standards for electronic message display signs.
Yes.
Thank you.
And
Mr. Board.
I don't think that having them comply with the message sign ordinance is any onerous at all, because I think they do comply now. So I'm not trying to be a pain in the butt, but it would be nice if we could keep updating things as we go along. But I do like the way you all have handled your message sign, so.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Acting Chair, I just called out the wrong provision. Sorry, give me 1 second, please. Or we can just say, you can leave it open-ended, and we'll say the municipal code provisions concerning electronic message signs, and then I'll put a reference to the code section for the benefit of the applicant. But it is not 4.4.7.W. That's different. Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Dawes.
He can go ahead with
Mr.
that.
Chairman, I'll make a motion. I move to approve the modification of SUP 07-059-1. Excuse me, a request for a special use permit for a sign that exceeds the height limit on property zone general commercial located at 3100 South Carson Street based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval contained in the staff report, including condition number 20 that indicates the
And 20.
20 that indicates the maximum elevation, and 21 that includes the update on the signage.
And I did find it's 4.6.6 of the municipal code. And are you leaving condition number 9 unchanged?
And leaving that unchanged then. All right.
And just a modification, the address is 3800 South Carson Street.
I apologize. 3800 South Carson Street. And the APN is 009-15317.
Okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Thank you to you. Okay, well, I guess we have another public hearing item, which is presentation and discussion only to give an update and solicit public comments on the 30% design of the South Carson Street Complete Streets project.
Good afternoon, Commission. Dan Stuckey, City Engineer for the record. I'm joined here by Tom Grundy. He's the project manager for the South Carson Complete Streets project. So kind of the plan today was just Hope asked me to give you all an update on where we stand with the project, some of the features, the schedule moving forward. We've been kind of making the rounds to other committees. We'll go to the Board of Supervisors tomorrow. So yeah, I just want to inform you, we've got, I don't know, 10 or so slides and a little flyover video to play for you this afternoon.
Yeah, I get it. Just do one side, just do one, yeah.
So we'll go ahead and get started. Just a little background to kind of help you guys know where we started out with this project and where we are today. You know, probably even back in 2010-ish, 2012, you know, when, you know, the freeway extension we knew was coming. You know, we staff internally a long time ago started to plan out what we were going to do with South Carson once it became ours. So this started a long time ago. It was kind of became official in 2014. This is when the Board of Supervisors approved that plan of expenditures for the facility and corridor projects throughout the city. So this included the South Carson Street project, but it also included what we did with downtown Carson Street, Curry Street, the MAC, the animal shelter, all those Bob Boldrick Theater, what's going to be happening soon. So all of those projects were part of that infrastructure tax, those types of projects. 2016, 2017, so while the downtown stuff was going, staff conducted a corridor study of the corridor, and included in this was some conceptual type plans that were produced. There were 2 public meetings, which I'll talk about a little bit more, but in those public meetings, they were heavily attended. The public got to vote on certain features as far as, do they want a landscaping buffer, a multi-use path, bike lanes, street lighting, all of that stuff, and kind of how the street cross sections would look when we got into design. So a lot of feedback was taken from those 2 public meetings, and what I'll show you in the flyover is really a product of those meetings, so what we're moving forward with today. So those are 2016, 2017. Then in April 2018, I think hopefully some of you have heard, but we won a big federal grant, the Tiger Grant, and this is very highly competitive grant. It was a large grant, $7.6 million roughly, and highly competitive. Like I said, I think there was, I want to say like 950 applicants, projects around the country, and there was about 32, I think, that were selected to receive grants. So this project really stood out to whoever was on that reviewing committee, and it was a big deal for us here at Carson City. And then after that, we took some time figuring out what the grant requirements, talking with the federal Tiger representatives. And then in July, August, we kicked off design, formulated our design team, and really we've been moving pretty full speed ahead since then. October through December we had a couple public outreach events. We met face-to-face with all the businesses along the corridor, which I'll talk about a little bit later in the presentation. We also had last week we had a general informational meeting for the public that was heavily attended. I'll talk a little bit about that. We wrapped up the 30% design, so we're still very early. We're about a year away from starting construction. And then we went to RTC, who's kind of the approval body as far as offering input on design. And then RTC recommends approval to the board. And so we'll go to the board tomorrow for them to show them the 30% design like we're showing you all today. So that's a little background of where we've come from on this project and where we stand today. I'm going to start this flyover video, but I did want to give you a little kind of showing the project limits. The project runs obviously along South Carson Street from 5th Street to the north, and then almost to the interchange to the south to about Appian Way is where we start our improvements. South of Appian Way, that still is under control of the Nevada Department of Transportation. We don't own that portion, so just north of Appian is where we start those improvements. And I'm gonna play this flyover video. It's about 4 minutes long, and I'm gonna talk about, as it's playing, I will do some commentary. I'll talk about some of the features as we go, and then obviously you guys can have questions afterwards, but we'll kind of start it here. So this is starting out heading south from 5th Street. And you see there's 2 southbound travel lanes, 1 northbound travel lane, and then that center turn lane. One thing you notice about that, we have some decorative street lighting. This is not exactly this, obviously we're early on, so we're still evaluating what those are going to look like, but you see some of that there. And then on the west side of the street, so the left side of the street, what you see here, some of those sidewalks get pushed out a little bit wider, kind of like what you see on downtown. We'll have some landscaping areas there as well. Here we're coming into around the Carson City Mall area, heading into the roundabout location at Stewart, which I'll talk more about the roundabout later on in the presentation, but you'll see the flyover here. One thing I did want to talk about is drainage improvements with this project. There's about $3 million worth of stormwater infrastructure that's going in. I know historically this is an area, every time there's a good size event, it gets hit pretty good with flooding. So what we're trying to do with this project is, get some of that runoff off the surface, get it into a subsurface storm drain, and send it off to the east. So there's the roundabout at Stewart Street. And again, I will talk about the roundabout features and the benefits of that as we advance through this presentation. So here's heading south from Stewart. And you'll notice that we pick up a lane in the northbound. So now this is essentially what it's going to look like the rest of the corridor, but you have 2 southbound lanes, 2 northbound lanes, and then a center shared turn lane. which that was a big benefit as a part of this project. I know the businesses, we'll talk about it a little bit more later, but currently in the center turn lane, there's a lot of that raised concrete median, and it makes it really hard to get to across and maneuver around that corridor. So we're removing, not all of it, I mean, we're still keeping locations where from a safety standpoint and an engineering analysis standpoint, we need it. But a lot of that median will be removed, and you'll see kind of like what you see here is you'll have this center shared turn lane, which will allow cars to get in and out of and access the different businesses along the corridor. Now, what you notice on the left side of your screen there, and this runs along the east side of the road, is that's a multi-use path separated from the roadway from about a what is it, like an 8-foot, 7-foot landscape buffer, 10 feet landscaping buffer. The multi-use path is a 12-foot multi-use path there. So that was a big benefit of this project as well. A lot of people are really excited about that. The landscaping in that area is going to be much, it's going to be very like low maintenance type native vegetation. There's going to be no grass with this project. You'll see some more street lighting along this corridor. South of Stewart, the street lighting is probably going to be less decorative than what you see north of Stewart, but there's really not much street lighting there now, so we're going to be adding that with the project. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is throughout the project, we're doing a lot of ADA enhancements. So this is upgrades to the pedestrian ramps across the corridor. So a number of ramps are getting replaced to come in compliance with ADA standards, as well as some of the driveway aprons there. Another thing, I guess, to talk about is we're looking at a couple crossing areas, illuminated pedestrian crossing areas. And this was considered with the project the whole time, but the goal of this project, we call it complete streets. So it's turning it from how it's functioned in the past as a state highway and turning it into a corridor that's more appropriate for what it is used as today, as well as not only accommodating vehicles, but also accommodating pedestrians and cyclists. So that's why you see, there's bike lanes, the multi-use path. So a lot of those things are factored in, and that's really the purpose of the project. One thing I didn't mention, there are also sewer, beyond the storm drainage improvements, there's also sewer and water improvements, and also some fiber optic line that we're running down. So pretty big utility investment as well. I'm going to go back to my presentation. So let's talk a little bit about public outreach. So I mentioned those September 2016 and March 2017 meetings. There's some pictures below. The bottom left there is a picture from those meetings. Again, heavy turnout to those. The public had voting buttons where they could vote on different features, and like I mentioned, a lot of those results of that voting are really that's the basis of the design that we're moving forward with today. So there's pretty extensive efforts back then. I did mention in October we walked the corridor. We broke up into groups of 2 staff members and some of the design team. We walked the corridor, met with the businesses, and this was just to get them information, kind of like what I'm telling you today, but information about the project, but also give them a bunch of different tools that we have available to stay connected through design and construction. So if there's concerns, we gathered feedback from them then, but even in the future, if they have, concerns about the project or things that they want to find out more about, we give them plenty of opportunities to reach out to us. I did put here the majority of the people, probably 95% of the businesses, were excited about this project. They were excited about the beautification components of it, beautifying that corridor from what it is today. But also, as I mentioned, the business access, that was a big deal to them. And I'll talk a little bit on the next slide about that feedback. But overall, there was very positive from the businesses along the corridor. December, so last week, we held a general informational meeting. Again, heavily attended. This is the picture from that meeting at the bottom of the screen there. Heavily attended. I think we had about 70 people there. We had boards set up around the room of the different plan sheets of the project, so they could walk around, they could talk to staff. I gave a presentation there, and then we gathered feedback from that meeting. And so I wanted to go over, I've listed a bullet list here of kind of the main the main comments that we've received, not only on the business, when we did those business visits, but also from this last meeting last week. And I just want to talk a little bit about each one of these. So, I mean, obviously when we went out to the businesses, the concern was, how is this going to impact us during construction, which that's obviously a question that we expect and understand. One thing I do want to mention is, again, we're still a year away from construction. But what we've done with this project, we've started that outreach early. We started that communication early. We also have the contractor who's ultimately going to build this project. It's a little bit different of a project delivery method than what's typically used. We bring them on early in the design stage. So we're working out, if a business has a concern about what construction access is going to look like when we're doing this improvement, we're working those out during the design stage right now. Well, not quite right now, but we will at 60% before we get into construction. So we'll have a lot of that stuff worked out, and we'll be able to communicate back to the businesses. So they'll have a more realistic approach of what it's going to look like. So I think that's a real benefit of the way this setup is structured. Landscaping, it's funny because this kind of ties into the first item there, but landscaping obstructing business signage. So one of the concerns of the business is, well, you're putting in landscaping, I don't want it to block my signs, so are you going to do a bunch of rows of trees, tall trees that eventually nobody's going to be able to see anything? So one thing we're working on, and this was discussed in those earlier public outreach meetings as well, but one thing we've worked into the design, we're still having some trees, but they're more strategically located in areas where there's not going to be conflicts with signs, so kind of clustered together in certain areas. And then we're going to also have a lot of low-lying vegetation, obviously. So that is actively being worked out as we move forward with the design. The pedestrian crossings, which I talked about a little bit earlier, we're looking at a couple of those illuminated type flashing signals where pedestrians can cross, because it is difficult nowadays for pedestrians to get across. So obviously at the traffic signals, you'd still be able to get across there, but we're also adding two different locations, and they'll probably be mid-block crossing where pedestrians will be able to, hit the button. There'll be the flashing yellow lights, and they'll be able to walk across safely. Two
south of Curry.
Two locations south of Stewart Street. I talked about those existing raised center medians. So with this project, I think between Kudus and Colorado, I did a rough calculation. There's about 4,000 feet of raised center median right now located along there. And we're removing, again, there's areas where we need to keep it from a safety perspective just to avoid, I won't say collisions, but to make it safe to drive on that corridor. But most of that is getting taken out with this project. So that was a big plus, I know, for a lot of the businesses there. One thing we haven't included in the 30, what you'll see in the flyover and on the plans that we have online, which I'll talk about where we have this stuff located later. But as the design progresses, that's I guess when you post 30% plans on design, I think the public usually takes them as those are final, but the design process, you work through it, and we have a 60 and a 90 and a final, and over the next year we'll progress that. But one of the comments, and these are great comments, we appreciate them, was to add, to look at deceleration lanes, specifically in the northbound direction. So these are lanes where people that are turning right can pull off and the through traffic can still continue to move forward. So that is something that's always been on our radar, but we received a lot of comments during our outreach meeting, so that tells me I need to do a better job of explaining that that's going to be included. But we are looking at that, and that's something that's going to be refined as we go. And then on the other side, the bullets there, multi-use path connectivity. So, in bike lanes. So, there are some concerns with, we have the multi-use path on the east side of the road, but near the interchange, it's on the west side of the road. And so how that connectivity is going to work. So the thing is, again, we don't control anything south of Appian. That's NDOT territory, and they've built that multi-use path up to about Appian Way. So what we're doing with this project, we know that we needed to cross it to the east side, so we're essentially extending the NDOT multi-use path on the west side of the roadway till Clearview, and then it's going to cross over at a signalized intersection, and then the multi-use path is going to pick up on the east side. And so that's the best as far as from the design. That's what worked from a design standpoint to still accommodate the multi-use path. But I think some people were like, well, why do we have to cross over? And the answer is we just don't control that area south of Appian, so there's really nothing we can do. the roundabout, which I have a whole slide dedicated to that, which we'll get to. And then, the other thing is, it was kind of interesting being out there because some people have really noticed a reduction since the extension of the freeway and are like, oh yeah, the huge reduction, the narrowing lanes, totally fine. And then some businesses, and totally understandable, there's concern there that, there's still, I don't think it's reduced at all. We still have a lot of traffic here. So that's what I'm going to address in this next slide is we've been collecting data before the freeway extension. We have traffic counts along that corridor. And then obviously after the opening of the freeway, and I want to talk about this. So essentially this project was based off about a 35 to 40% reduction in traffic volume. That's what we were forecasting when that freeway extension. And it's essentially hit that and then some is what we've seen. So the figure there and what I've circled in red is essentially we were adding, over 40,000 vehicles. This is a traffic count at around Kuntz Lane. About over 40,000 vehicles before the freeway extension, and then it dropped basically by about 45% down to about 25,000 or so that you see today. So again, significant reductions in traffic for the south of Fairview portion. Now, how about north of Fairview? What's happened there? And really, this has been like a it's dropped. Reductions have happened twice now with the different freeway extensions. So what I want to point out, if you look back in 2009 when Phase 2A, so this is the William Street to Fairview freeway extension opened, there was a 33% reduction of traffic along that corridor. And then there was an additional 30% with the latest opening of the freeway extension in 2017. So overall, you're looking at about a 60% reduction in traffic volume along there. So I want to be very clear that not only were we modeling it back then, but we're constantly updating our models and looking not just now, because, I think a lot of people are like, okay, well, maybe it works now, but Carson City's growing, and they're absolutely right, it is growing. And so what we do with our modeling is we look now, but we also look in a 2040 scenario. So we look 20 plus years in the future. We look at how things are going to grow. We look at where trip generation is going to come and who's going to use that corridor. And everything we've seen is right on line with what we projected in years past, is that corridor is going to function at an adequate level of service and meet all of our standards moving forward, not only now, but in the future scenario. I did want to address that there is backup that happens at the very south end at that interchange. Staff is aware of that. And I know it's during a peak hour. I want to be clear on this too. We're not starting our lane reductions until around Snyder Avenue North. So we're not touching the lanes configuration. We don't have control south of Appian. That's NDOT territory. What we do have control over is signal timing. And so right now we're under contract with somebody to look at optimizing that signal timing, because we think if we can optimize signal timing through that corridor, it is going to improve efficiency through there south of Appian Way. So we are actively looking at that, but as far as this project really impacting that interchange, we don't see a big impact there. So now the roundabout. Roundabouts, I think anytime they're proposed, they're different than what we're used to here in Carson City. And so I want to talk about this and how we're designing this roundabout. I think that will make it not only very efficient, but also easy to navigate. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So roundabouts, from just an efficiency standpoint, they're about the highest, most efficient intersection you can have. And this has been proven over and over again. Not only will it handle, we've modeled this roundabout, how it's going to work right when the project's built, basically next year, but also in the 2040 scenario. And it's going to function at a level of service that matches today or is better than what is happening at that intersection. And that's in the peak hour of the day. Now, the thing you have to think about, so we model everything on like worst case scenario, but you also got to think, I was just down there last week and I was heading southbound, turning left at Stewart Street, and I waited, it was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, there was nobody north-south, and I waited at that light. not that long, but I still waited there. With the roundabout, I mean, that's the beauty, especially during the off-peak hours, is you don't wait. You get in there and it's continuous and free-flowing, and there's a lot of great efficiency associated with that. The big thing with a roundabout is improved safety, and I think the stats from the FHWA is there's like a 90% reduction in traffic collisions of a roundabout versus a signalized intersection. There's also a huge reduction in fatalities. We've done some analysis. Our consultant did some, it's like a societal cost analysis, but they look at crash reductions. They anticipate about a 50% reduction in crashes, but then they try to quantify that on a dollar sense on what that actually comes to over a 20-year period. And it's about $3 million of societal cost savings. So that is, property damage, vehicle damage, medical type bills associated with that. So all that factored in, there's a huge safety benefit to this roundabout. What I wanted to talk about from a navigation standpoint is, I think, where roundabouts get confusing is when you have multi-lane roundabouts. So, 2 lanes going around the circle and people switching lanes, or maybe they're in the wrong lane entering. This roundabout is a single lane roundabout. So we have some bypass lanes. If you can see on the north or the very top of your screen, there is, for the southbound traffic, you can see it doesn't even go into the roundabout. It completely bypasses it. So people that are heading southbound, they don't even really need to go through the intersection. They could, go through the roundabout. They could, and they could still go southbound if they went through the roundabout, but they don't need to. We also are keeping that sweeping right onto Stewart Street. So again, it's kind of a bypass. You don't have to go through it if you want to go to Stewart, but you can. So there's a lot of ways we're designing it to make it easy to navigate, but still have great efficiency. One thing from the city standpoint is, traffic signals. I'm talked about signalized timing, south of the corridor. Well, that's something that's continual throughout the life of a traffic signal, and it's time and cost to the city. So we have to, always constantly looking at our signal timing. Traffic signals need to be maintained. They need to be upgraded. So as far as costs for the future, a roundabout is much more cost effective than a traffic signal. And then the other thing I wanted to hit with the roundabout is that this is serving kind of as that transitional zone. So south of the roundabout, it's going to be more of a, commercial corridor feel, very productive, kind of what you see today. And then north, you're going to start to transition into more of a downtown feel north of Stewart. So this will kind of be that transition zone, I guess you could say, or the gateway feature is kind of what we're calling it. I'll talk a little bit. We're looking at, in the middle of that roundabout, we have some funding lined up, but we're looking at a possible monument type sculpture, kind of a gateway feature that's kind of welcoming people into kind of more of the downtown core. So these are just some ideas to show you kind of what we're thinking about, but it would obviously be something that factors in Nevada, Carson City culture and all that. So we're working on that as we move forward, but it would likely go at that roundabout location, along with some nice landscaping features there. Yeah, there you go. Hey, we're collecting all ideas. So total project funding, it's about $18.7 million, and you can see there's about 7 different funding sources for this project. I think the thing I wanted to point out, you've got the redevelopment a little there, and then the sales tax money is the infrastructure tax, so about $1 million there. But about 75% of the project is funded through state or federal funds. So I think that's important. We've really, with the Tiger Grant specifically, we've leveraged local funding to get more federal funding to complete the project. So I think that's a nice benefit and something that's obviously a positive. So the schedule moving forward, just to give you guys a feel, January, February, we're looking at completing the 60% design. So we're moving forward right now, transitioning from 30 to 60, and then April, May timeframe for 90%, and June, July for final. We held that public meeting last week, but we have another type of, as we move into the 60% design, we're going to have kind of a workshop where anybody can come in, but I think a lot of the businesses are going to want to come in and talk specific about what's happening in front of their business. So we'll be available with the plan sheets and be able to discuss that. Probably reserve the permitting center downtown for the entire day sometime in February. And then board and committee updates. I don't have you all on here, but I'd be happy to, I can come back. Hope always just asks me, and if Hope asks, I say yes. So if she asks again, I will say yes to come back. I never say no to Hope. But we are required, we're going to go to RAC, RTC, and then Board of Supervisors. Board of Supervisors tomorrow, we'll go there for a 30% update. We also go to the Historical Resources Commission meeting on January 10th. This is important because, as we do any project, but specifically one of this size, even though we're staying within the existing roadway footprint, we want to make sure that we're not, having any adverse impact on historical or cultural resources. So we'll be working with the HRC. We're also seeking public input. So if anybody has any, known historical or cultural, concerns in that area, please reach out, and I'll talk about ways to get in touch. But we're going to HRC for that meeting on January 10th. And then kind of to match those milestones, we're looking at like a February update to all those committees and boards, and then the same with like a April, May for the 90% design. Construction, we're looking at starting at the end of the year, so basically like almost a year from today. And then really the bulk of the construction will happen in the year 2020, with it probably extending a little into 2021. It'll probably be about a 18-month construction. But again, we're working out those details as we get further into design. We'll have obviously a better feel for how that's going to look in the duration. So I wanted to mention, try to take every opportunity. We've received a ton of feedback from the public, which I consider a big success on our end. There's been a lot of really good comments, but also what we're trying to do is make sure we're getting information out. We're keeping the public informed as we step through this process. So obviously you can reach out to myself. I don't have my contact information on there, but it's all over the Carson Proud website. But Tom Grundy, the project manager, he knows the most about the project anyway. His contact email and phone number is there. carsonproud.com, tons of information. We just did a big update. We're putting a couple more updates this week, but it kind of takes you through like the different life of the project, I guess. So we talk about and I'll probably put a summary of today's meeting on there as well. So it's a great opportunity if you want a history of the project, and there's a FAQ on there as well, which we're going to be constantly updating as we move forward and get feedback. So it's a great resource for project information. We're also putting out a text subscription service. This has actually been really popular so far since we put it out there. All you have to do is text Carson Proud to the number 31996, and it automatically enrolls you into automatic updates as we move forward for the project. I want to make sure that it's not like you're going to be getting something every hour, every day. It's going to be, once a month. If we're having a big public meeting, you get a text on your phone. So it's worth it to sign up. It's not going to like bombard you with stuff. But I know a lot of people really like getting their information this way. So it's a good tool out there. Social media updates, we're always putting up out stuff there. And then as we move into construction, we'll have kind of like what we've done with downtown Carson and Courtesy. We'll have a live construction map, which will be hosted on the Carson Proud website. But people can go, if they want to head into South Carson and they're trying to figure out, hey, what's it look like today? What's construction? What are the detours? They can go, and the map will be updated every week, every day if we need to, if there's changes. So that'll be a nice tool for people. And then, of course, we'll have a construction hotline set up. And that's a hotline number that basically, it'll probably get routed to either Tom or myself. So as a resident, as a business owner, as somebody who just wants to get some comments in during construction, it'll call our phone and we'll get back to you. So anyway, there's a number of options. I just always want to explain that. And with that, we'll open it up to questions.
Any questions for?
Two questions. The stormwater figure, the 2.9 million, is that currently factored into my water rate now, so that I am not going to be anticipating another increase in my water bill?
That money has been approved and is based off what is today. As far as, I mean, we're constantly, there's rate refreshes and looking at rate studies and all that. So I'm not really the one to answer that, but as far as that money, that's been planned for years to send that money over to the South Carson project.
Okay, so my winter water bill at $87 a month is not going to go up.
I cannot answer that because I don't have that information, but today, yes, I think that's pretty safe.
Okay, and just a comment about the roundabouts. God knows that nobody really knows how to drive those here in this town, and there are several of them. So education would be really good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I said, I mean, I'm pretty used to roundabouts, but I think every time you get in one for the first time, it definitely, even a really well-designed one, the first time you drive one, it takes a little bit of feeling out and how to do it. But I am confident that the way we've set up this roundabout is about as good a design as it can be as far as from a navigation standpoint and making people feel comfortable. But, I mean, it's new. Roundabouts are new to the area, but it's not, I don't want to use Europe, but like the East Coast, they're very prevalent over there. The West Coast, they're becoming more prevalent because there's a lot of really big advantages with them. So,
well, I live off of North Ridge Drive. And on North Ridge Drive, you've got 4 roundabouts in 6, 7 city blocks. And nobody knows how to drive those roundabouts. And they're one lane.
Yeah.
So, it gets interesting certain times of the day. Just saying.
Yeah.
But if you didn't have those roundabouts, you'd have people speeding at 45 miles an hour along there. But they have to slow down when they get to the roundabout.
They just speed.
Mr. Borders.
Okay. The deceleration lanes or right turn lanes, whatever you want to call them, I'm sure you all, with all your meetings, considered at those same intersections having an acceleration lane for the people trying to turn right and to merge into the traffic. And it doesn't look like you have any, so obviously it doesn't appear to be a traffic problem. But the question is, were they considered and ruled out for that reason? Or
yeah, so that's being done. Like the 30%, there was a lot of work to get to 30%, but that more advanced analysis and looking at that stuff, that's happening right now as we speak, going from 30 to 60. So to answer your question, yes, that'll all be looked at.
In regards to the flyover and things that I saw 2 specific things that I would like to look at eventually. Would now be a good time to bring them up, or the February meeting where everyone's meeting, the 60% meeting, to put input, or
I
in
would
this
say
capacity?
The earlier the better is great. So
well, yeah. I know from my experience. So I own a business right behind the Shell, right where you're putting the roundabout there, on Curry Street, and so obviously that'll affect my business more. But the reason I bring up that kind of proximity to the rest of what you've done there is we've heard a lot, and we've talked, I'm in construction, talked to a lot of people in the industry about the previous road upgrades. And the biggest concern that I hear, and I agree 100%, is the parking done at a parallel as opposed to a diagonal rate. Or not rate, but at a diagonal angle. So I think that it should be looked at. I've been in plenty of cities all over the country where the downtown area, whether it was beautified or built that way initially, it was filled with diagonal parking and a 1-lane road next to it. It adds to the congestive nature of it, which is what you're trying to do, where not so much where you're going to be updating this, but especially where we already did it, kind of congest traffic and slow it down a little bit. It adds to that, and also you could double the parking you guys have down there, which after you add in the parking we took away from 3rd Street, we really didn't add much parking down there. So I like that. I think that should be looked at. Additionally, the roundabout, I sounds like you. I've had a lot of experience with roundabouts as well, just driving through them. That's all. And I was thinking, and this is just, I'm no expert, but if you're heading south You have one lane, the southbound lane, you can bypass the roundabout. What if we did that 2 lanes? I drive that road all the time, and I sense just looking at that, what's going to happen is people are going to want to get over to the right to bypass, and they're either going to be cruising through the roundabout because they're trying to go fast, or they're going to be getting over and it'll congest right into that far right lane anyways. Maybe there's a way so you can just stay in both lanes and go around and add a little left into the roundabout turn lane if you're going left or turning around or something like that. And that's all I got. Thanks.
Yeah, so those are great points. I also look like when you have 2 lanes going in, then it's sometimes people that are in the outside lane that want to go left onto Stewart. They can't because then it's like works the other way, you know what I mean? So, but again, we're looking at all these things in design. I also think signage is important and striping as far as you guys know how effective that can be if you have proper signage and striping before getting in a roundabout. But no, I totally agree. We need to make sure that we're avoiding that scenario where people are in the wrong lane and cutting over at the last second and causing problems. So, but I think we can address it with signage and striping.
The biggest thing is the diagonal parking. Please, if we could look into that, that would be awesome.
So actually, I do want to follow up on that because I want to make sure I understand you clearly. So with this project, we're not adding much parking the way it is.
It just looked like 2 or 3 cutouts.
So
right.
what we're doing is similar to what was done on Carson Street, which I know I wouldn't consider it's parallel parking. But it's not parallel parking because those spaces are so big that I've never really ever seen anybody have to parallel parking. So we're looking, I call them like parking pull-out areas. So we're looking at adding something similar to what's in downtown Carson. So you're saying, I guess your opinion on that's better than the diagonal? Okay.
Opposite. I mean, it sure seems, especially because it's not the difficulty that I'm addressing in parallel parking. Yeah. It's how much space it takes out. We've got 2 or 3 spaces in those. I mean, you could turn that into 4 or 6 spaces by switching them to diagonal. You see what I'm saying? Now, the bus stop one, I think there's one with a bus stop in it down there. Obviously, you can't do much there. But the rest of them, you can take those 3 spaces, put them at a diagonal orientation, and double your parking right there.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know as far as the ones you have built if they're deep enough or anything like that.
Yeah.
But on ones coming up, if you're doing any parking, it's never too late.
Yeah, no, those are good comments. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi. One of the things that I've seen a lot coming up on this, and I do a lot of social media, so I get a lot of this, and I think one of the biggest things that you're going to have to overcome is people are saying it's easier to leave Carson than to get here. So I think that's something that needs to be noted, where you have 1 lane coming in and 2 lanes going out. I mean, that's on that. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about is that one of the things that I found that was really impressive about some of the multi-use paths that Carson has done in the past is actually, instead of a straight line, because when you're driving it makes you want to go faster, is to actually, wind them a little bit like you guys have off of Sonoma and things like that, because with the landscaping and having it like that, it's almost a traffic calming device. Because even on the flyover, when you see the multi-use path, it seems like we're driving faster. So that's one of the things I wanted to say is maybe just do a visual thing to make it kind of wind a little bit. The other question I had is, I understand that you're looking at the roundabout at Stewart and Carson Street, which, to me, I think the one that really needs to be addressed is Rhodes. Rhodes is the one that has the accidents. I very seldom see any accidents at Stewart and Carson, but at Rhodes, it's a nightmare. So I say that, and let's see. Oh, because I live on the south end of town, and a lot of people are concerned that, on the north end of town, and a lot of people are concerned that the south end of town is getting, all the attention. Well, one of the things that's happened to the south, north end of town is that we have these, the raised traffic calming devices and turnouts and things like this. And they initially had landscaping in and they just ripped all the stuff out. So why, and trying to maintain them and getting a water source to them. So if we're going to do this, are we going to go ahead and commit to the landscaping, commit to the water, commit to the maintenance of it? Is there going to be any kind of a, like with the downtown Carson Street where they take care of the landscaping and so forth, is there a business improvement district that's going to be paying for that, or is this paid for out of here? And if it's going to be handled by a separate contractor or Parks and Recreation, because Parks and Recreation is overwhelmed. You can see that on Ormsby Boulevard, you can see that off Sonoma Street, you can see it on a couple of different areas, that's just another, thing that really wasn't part of their bailiwick. But that's one of the things I'm concerned about, because I've just seen too many of these that have been landscaped and ripped out.
Yeah.
So.
That's a great question. I'm going to try to address, because there's a lot of questions in there on that last one, but I'll try to address them all. So first of all, as far as North Carson being neglected, I want to tell you that in these corridor project improvements, South Carson was always downtown first, then to South Carson. William Street would be the next one, and then it would be North Carson Street. So I want to make sure that people don't feel neglected. We have a master plan for these, and that's still the plan to head up north eventually. Yes, the landscaping. So absolutely, every landscaping we put in now, we think about maintenance and long-term. Similar to what we've done in downtown, the plan is to form like I think downtown is called a neighborhood improvement district. This would be, similar, but I think business improvement district, or however you want to call it. So that is the plan. And the way that they work with the downtown, and Lee, you can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but it is a separate contractor that does that work for the landscape maintenance and trash and all that stuff there. So,
is the plan still to implement a neighborhood district for the south corridor, though, right?
Yes, yeah. So the plan is, sorry, I thought I said that, but yeah, it's the plan is to implement something similar for the South Carson corridor as well.
Do you have a buy-off from the business people to be joining that already?
That has, and Lee, again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's something that's been discussed when this project originated, when the plan of expenditures, it was approved in 2014, that was known that was initially going to happen. And yeah, once we have an idea of maintenance costs and the landscaping that's going to go in, those talks will progress. Again, it's not like it should be a huge surprise because this has been talked about in the past, but as we get a better feel for what that maintenance will look like, we'll start that conversation probably around about the 60% design stage.
Any other comments? I just have one, in passing, and there was a lot of discussion at the meeting last week about the crosswalks, and some people were talking about, how the signs on Stewart Street with the flashing and the ones on. Have you looked at doing the crosswalk light strips, right at surface level? It's much easier to see those from a distance if you don't have if there's a tractor trailer truck in front of you or something.
Tom just pointed out that when you were saying that, I'm like, oh, that's a really good idea. The unfortunate thing here, or fortunate, is we have snow in the city, and so snow plows just tear those things apart when we do it. So that's really why we don't.
Flashing signs. Flashing signs are RFBs. We're going to do those.
Yeah, but we are doing the flashing yellow signal, type things that you see on Stewart, but just not on the surface. Because you're asking about like surface lighting, right? And so that's why we wouldn't do those. But I think, and we talked about at the meeting the other day, is we're trying to do like a refuge island in the middle of those center turn lanes, because I know Stewart Street right now, it's, I think, 4 lanes of traffic that you cross there. And I know there was, in that public meeting, there was like, well, they work sometimes, but there's still a lot of people that just don't pay attention when they're driving through, and I don't feel safe or whatever. So those were really good feedback. But one of the things we're looking at with these mid-block crossings is being able to put a refuge island where you can cross 2 lanes and stay there, and then cross again there. So that is some, I mean, everything's on the table right now, and we're working on designing those to be as safe as they can be. But regardless, I mean, I think that is a focus of this project, is to enhance those. But I mean, because right now it's not safe to go. I've seen people run across and stand on the raised median in the middle that's only this wide while traffic's rushing by, which is not a good. I'm pretty sure that's not legal, first of all, but it's not a good scenario. So we're hoping, and that's why it was important for us to get the feedback from the public, because they're really the ones that are going to be using these. We know kind of whereabout we want them, but we wanted to get that feedback because we want to put something in there that's heavily used too, So I think it was good to get some feedback there. But yeah, all options are on the table, and we're looking into that moving forward.
Did you address
So we looked, as far as the roads, I think it was Mrs. Preston that asked that, but we evaluated 6 different roundabout locations across the corridor. So the plan was always to have a roundabout. We wanted to look at where it made the most sense from like a demand standpoint to invest the money to do it, and where it would make the most sense. And we had an independent analysis, really kind of 2 different analyses done, and Stewart was really the place, not only that we could effectively fit it in, because when you add in where we were looking at one point, looking at alternative for a roundabout, like where the frontage road was, but to make it fit with the frontage road there, it was just really funky. And then there also just wasn't the demand there of people that would need to make like the left turn out. So Stewart, for a number of reasons, was the ideal location and the reason why we went forward in that direction. Future for roads, I think, depending on, that's across from the Armory, right, site. Depending on how that Armory site developed, I know there's a lot going on that's above my level as far as what's going to happen with that in the future. It is the state's property, but depending on how that gets developed in that corridor, potentially there could be a traffic signal at roads in the future. That's something that we're constantly evaluating. But as of now and where we see it, it didn't make sense to do anything today with this project. But I don't want to say that it's not in the future of what could happen there. So.
And it's my understanding that one of the reasons that you chose the Stewart Street location was the possibility of connecting to Courage Street sometime in the future, and that would be a perfect place for it.
Yeah, so that's a great point, and definitely was a part of that decision. It would be really nice to have another connection to Curry Street. We've had talks with the state, the Forest Service that owns that land for off and on for years. We're in talks now, just and for them, there's a lot. It's not that easy to get across, but we've set it up so in the future, if those talks progress and there's a decision made where we can make that connection, we can accommodate it with our current configuration and have that. But it would be nice. As far as our transportation staff, I know another connection to Curry would be a nice thing for the future. So yeah, to have that as an option in the future was definitely a part of the decision.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
I'm sure it got looked at, and I'm sure it's, from a budget standpoint, not doable, but it seems like a longer standing solution to look at a pedestrian overpass situation for the multi-use path, as opposed to 2 separate crosswalks, if I understood it, 2 separate crosswalks with lights and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, as far as where it crosses over from one side of the street to the other, yeah, so it'll happen at Clearview. Yeah, it really is just a budget issue, and that was actually brought up. You're not the only one that's brought that up at a lot of those public meetings, is talking about some sort of overpass feature, and yeah, that would be great, for a lot of reasons, but they're also really expensive, and we just need to be aware of what we can fit in with this project. So, but it's definitely a good idea, good suggestion.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank
you. Closing the public hearing. There's no public here to comment, so we'll move on to staff reports.
Just a couple updates for you since we got some special meetings coming up. First of all, for reporting on things that have been to you before, this meeting's a little earlier, so actually tomorrow at the Board of Supervisors meeting, they're considering the Plateau Development Zoning Map Amendment and tentative subdivision map that you made a recommendation on in November, and also the Cochise Street, the Southwest Carson zoning map amendment down there. That's on the agenda for the Board of Supervisors tomorrow. Regarding the Planning Commission items for January, as you know, we're planning on having a special meeting on Tuesday, January 15th in this room. I think the emails have said it, but basically after the Board of Supervisors meeting on January 16th, there's 3 weeks between that meeting and their next meeting, and they're redoing all the technology in this room. So there's going to be new screens, new microphones and everything. So there's a big technology upgrade going on in here, and this room's not going to be available for 3 weeks, which would be your regular meeting date. The deadline for the January 30th Planning Commission items meeting is not till tomorrow. We keep getting things. We were hoping to have a light agenda that we could knock out at that early meeting that we can get at, and we can actually have the meeting here. We're getting a lot of items though, so once we get everything tomorrow, we're going to look at it and see what we can do, whether or not we think we can have all those items on the 15th, or if we'll still need to have a meeting on January 30th, and also with that then find an appropriate room for whatever items we're going to have. Right now, if we had to, we could meet in the Bonanza room over there. It's really small though, so if we have any items that come in and that are going to involve a lot of public coming, that's really not going to work. So stay tuned to that. I think by next week we'll be able to get information out to the commissioners as to where we're going to be. We'll figure that out, and that's all I have to. Oh, and so with that early meeting and the appointments, so even though we have a couple members whose terms are up at the end of this year and get reappointed in January, but you serve until replaced, the Board of Supervisors isn't going to take action on replacements until their second meeting in January, because Stacy Giome's they're not sworn in until after the first meeting. So actually they're still going to have the same board members at the first meeting in January. So the new board's not on until the second meeting in January. So Paul and Elise still plan on attending at least the January 15th meetings. Yep, and so that's my update. Thank you.
Okay. Hope, do you have anything? Any commissioners?
Merry Christmas.
Yep. Any public comment? Seeing none?
Mr. Acting Chairman, I move we adjourn.
We have a second? We have a motion and a second. We are adjourned.
Hey.